Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're in week 4 of Seed 540. Just a couple of notes on the course administration. Don't forget to read through the adjusted course calendar under syllabus. Please pay special attention to the weeks for independent study and upcoming break. So again, please look through the adjusted course calendar under syllabus here. Okay, so we are on the final end of this first theme for the class. We've been talking about human development. Last week we talked about learning theories and application in the classroom, and this week we're going to finish up that section on learning theories and application. After this, we're going to be moving into motivation and learning strategies. All right, for just a little bit of a lead in here, I want you to think about, how do you study best? By yourself or with others? Do you take notes? What strategies do you use to remember information? In this week's tasks, I would like to have you first of all read in the big book, chapters 8 and 9, and then in the little book, I'd like to have you read the case study 3.5, Technology Progress Equity. This week there will be a discussion thread in the discussion board about this case study, so please make sure that you're reading through that. You will be creating your own individual notes chart for constructivism here this week. Last week you did the jigsaw activity, so you worked as a group to come up with all those different subsections for the theory chart. Now you're going to be doing it on your own just for constructivism, using the same chart you used for the jigsaw activity. Again, same thing, post the chart on Saturday, but this time around I'm going to be posting an answer key on Sunday. On Sunday there'll also be the quiz. And please don't forget, your topics for your theory into practice are due Monday. Please post in the week 4 discussion board. I know there have been some questions as to where you post it, so please post all your topics in the week 4 discussion board. So a few comments on the tasks. Again, there are no right or wrong answers for the individual activities that are there on the discussion board, especially for this chart activity. I encourage you to read through others' charts to see how they organize the material and how they're applying that theory into their own practice. I think that last section there is the most meaningful, I mean, aside from the criticisms, but really focus on how students are going to be applying it into their own practice. If you need any assistance finding a topic for the Theory into Practice assignment, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to brainstorm with you. And don't forget, again, the due date for posting your topic is in the, please post it in the week 4 discussion board by Monday. I will go ahead and place you in your groups. That's going to be key. I want to see who all's out there, and there may be several that fit into one category, in which case I'm going to have to separate everyone out. But please, please, please get your topic into the discussion board, the week 4 discussion board thread by Monday. Okay, let's head into the main ideas here for week 4. Again, looking at the AP top 20 principles for this week, we have here the strategic learner and learning theories. We're going to be looking at principle 2, what students already know affects their learning. Principle 4, learning is based on context, so generalizing and learning to new contexts is not spontaneous, but instead needs to be facilitated. Principle 5, acquiring long-term knowledge and skill is largely dependent on practice. Principle 6, clear, explanatory, and timely feedback to students is important for learning. And finally, Principle 8, student creativity can be fostered. All right, so up to now, we have learned 3 learning theories. We've had behaviorism, social cognitive, and cognitive learning. We explored these theories last week in the jigsaw activity, but there's one more that we're going to be looking at. and that is constructivism. That's in chapter 9, so we're going to be doing things a little flipped here. I'd like to look at chapter 9 first. And again, our final learning theory we're going to be looking at is constructivism. That will be your individual chart activity to go through that theory and flesh that out and how you can apply constructivism in your own practice. So again, here's your chart outline, the explanation, the major concepts, the goals of instruction, and then the criticisms. You're going to be doing this on your own. I've provided the chart for you in the weekly folder, so week 4 weekly folder. And again, on Saturday, Sunday, right around there, I'll be providing the answer key for you so that you can go back and just double check your work. One big hint. Please focus on the role of interaction on pages 400 through 403. I also want you to focus on the importance of formative assessment. That's a huge term in education, so I really want to make sure that you understand that term and how that applies to constructivism. That's on page 404. Okay, so just a brief clarification on a couple things before we move away from constructivism. These are two terms that often get muddied when we think about constructivism. We have here first cognitive constructivism, which is the individual construction process. Learners construct knowledge as they interact with the environment. Okay, so hopefully everyone has seen The Incredibles. Love the movie, really great movie. And a great way to think about the distinction between this cognitive constructivism and social constructivism is to think about The Incredibles. So first, cognitive constructivism, like I said, is that individual process. And if you think about it in the movie, when Mr. Incredible was there on the island and he was trying to understand what was going on and he was interacting with the environment, he was trying to make sense of what was going on by himself. So that's a great way of thinking about this cognitive constructivism versus social constructivism. When the family all came together, learning is the internalization and adoption of external experience. All learning is socially mediated. So if you see here in this picture, we have the kids, which are kind of in the background. They're observing what's going on in their environment, but they're behind their parents who are the role models. The parents are role modeling what it's like to be a super. The kids are learning about it. And in fact, later on in the show, you have the girl Violet who starts internalizing it as a teenager and starts to understand what it means to be a super in her own life. But that had to be modeled. And again, all learning is socially mediated. So again, when you think about constructivism, there's not just one way to think about it. There's the individualized cognitive constructivism and then the social constructivism. Okay, so just to recap all of the theories that we have learned up to now. We've had the development theories, which we have listed here, the cognitive language development, personality development, identity development, social emotional development, moral development. And then for the past couple of weeks, we've been looking at the learning theories, and that's important to keep those two things separated in your mind, the development theories and then the learning theories. We have here behaviorism, social cognitive, cognitive learning, and constructivism. I have a handy little chart that I put in the weekly folder that has these visual cues associated with it. And I encourage you to look at that and make sure that you understand all these before we move into the next category next week on motivation. So we're going to be adding a new column over there. But again, making sure that you have all those categories of theories down pat, and then all the subsequent and all the subcategories listed underneath it. You understand them because they will appear later in your life. Okay, so now we're going to go back to chapter 8. And in chapter 8, there are three main themes I want you to come away with. I want you to look at problem solving, the strategic learner, and critical thinking. We're going to take each one of those in turn here. In the book, they have a really fantastic little chart that I strongly suggest you spend some time reading through. It's a chart on page 346 that describes the problem-solving process. And you'll notice in the conversation about the problem-solving process, they use concepts you may have learned before, such as working memory and cognitive load. So if you don't remember what those are, go back to the previous chapter to refresh. A hot topic in education these days is problem-based learning, or PBL. You see it all over the place. And there are a lot of critiques. Some people think, problem-based learning is great. Others have criticisms of it. But regardless, it's a hot topic, and I strongly recommend you read through that section so that you can understand it when you're in your own practice. There's some good problem-based learning, and then there's some not so great problem-based learning activities. So in order to help you be a discerning judge of what good problem-based learning is, here are the characteristics that you need to keep in mind. First of all, begin with a problem, and solving it is the lesson's focus. So it's not something that you tack on at the very end, and it's not something that it's like, oh, here's a fun activity to do at the very end because we need to kill time. It's definitely solving it is the lesson's focus. Students design strategies and then steps to find those solutions. And then we have here, learners work in groups, so all are involved. I think the book recommends that you have groups around 3 to 4, strongly agree, because you want to make sure that all of your problem-based learning activities engage each participant in that group. You get it too large, there's that tendency of just kind of hiding in the shadows. You want to make sure that you have an opportunity for all students in the group to participate. And what's key in problem-based learning is that the teacher functions as a guide. They're not the sage on the stage dictating how things go. They really kind of let the students take the reins. They provide questions, clarifying questions, and then they scaffold the information up for the students. But what's key here is that they're kind of a floater. They're watching the students, they're coaching them, and they're guiding them throughout these activities. The next theme in Chapter 8 that you're going to see is strategic learner. This is one of my big bread and butters in my work with students. The first thing that I want to say about strategic learner, which is not in the textbook, but I want to emphasize it, is that there are a lot of assumptions coming from secondary educators that they don't need to focus on study skills. They don't need to focus on helping students be a strategic learner because they assume that's already been taken care of in elementary education. But as we learned with Piaget, students in our age group in the secondary education realm are moving into a new way of thinking. As we learned with Piaget, with the formal operations thinking, is that students are exploring this new way of thinking, but they need to be guided, much like Vygotsky said, in that knowledgeable other, right? So students need to learn new ways of thinking. They need to learn new strategies to access and develop that thinking. And that's your job. I mean, it should be in tandem with presenting the content. Too often secondary educators think, woohoo, I just get to be in the content and that's all I need to do. You still need to help students study and become strategic learners so they can effectively access your content. The second thing they discuss in the book is that metacognition. We've already explored that before, but read through that again because that is such a key concept. And then finally, it goes through different study strategies on page 360 through 363. We have here note-taking, using text signals, summarizing, elaborative questioning, concept mapping. These are all great examples, things that you can use in your own practice. So please spend time looking through those study strategies, thinking about how you can incorporate it into your own teaching so that students can best access your content. And again, it needs to be taught. And finally, I've saved the most controversial for last. Critical thinking. This is a huge issue facing education right now, both internally and externally. One of the big questions that we get in education, is it the job of education? Should you guys be teaching critical thinking? And the answer is a resounding yes. We need to teach critical thinking to our students. We make and assess conclusions based on evidence and factual information when we're engaged in critical thinking. It involves a complex cognitive process. And if there's one thing that you probably learned from the previous theories, is that when you have complex cognitive processes, you need to have that knowledgeable other that Vygotsky talks about. You need to make sure that we are teaching it and helping students understand that it is a complex process. The text goes through a lot of reasons why we're, not critical thinkers these days and all the different headwinds that we're facing in education when it comes to critical thinking. The one concept I want to draw your attention to is cognitive architecture. And our cognitive architecture in our brains is the combination of our memory stores, so the sensory, working, and long-term memories, plus the cognitive processes of moving from store to store. So how do we engage our short-term thinking with our long-term thinking and vice versa? How do we engage our sensory perception into our working memory? That kind of thing. So it's that process of moving from memory to memory and the actual structural bricks of your memory that create this cognitive architecture. Why this is key. Our understanding of complex problems and solutions imposes a heavy cognitive load on our limited capacity working memory. And as a result, what we do is we accept simplistic solutions to reduce that load. Okay, so it's almost like, if you think about it, when we have complex problems, it's like shaking that building in your head in an earthquake. But we have a limited capacity to keep that building upright, and we have a limited capacity to keep it from falling over. So what we do as a result to safeguard, to create those kind of safety measures, is we come up with simplistic solutions to reduce the load. And it makes sense. When we're overwhelmed, we're inundated with information, we have all these things coming at us from various sources. It's our natural inclination to just keep it simple and to try to come up with the most simplistic explanation for what we're all going through. We've all seen this. So I think that that's key to know as educators, that your job then, your role as an educator in this situation, is to model that awareness, to point it out. There's a lot out there, but don't be tempted to be simplistic about everything. Demand that evidence of students. Make sure that you keep asking for sources. Keep asking for factual information from our students, because the temptation, as we all know, is to go to sources that maybe aren't so factual. And again, to highlight that complexity, to really draw that out of your students. Again, being that role model, showing that it is complex, that we need not accept that there's a simplistic solution to reduce that cognitive load, to sit with the problem and to really work through it and think through it with factual evidence. All right, that is it for this week. Again, please feel free to text me if you have any questions or concerns. Again, just as a reminder, if you're needing help coming up with a topic for your theory into practice, please get in touch with me. I'm happy to brainstorm with you. And that's it for now. Happy studying. We'll see you in the discussion board.